Welcome to today's planning committee meeting. Sorry.
Katie, we still let the public in.
Oh, sorry. Well, just we'll just take two. Welcome to the planning committee meeting dated Wednesday the 4th of June 2025. First of all, I'd like to welcome back existing committee members and also new members of the committee who are just joining with us now. So we'll start off with any declarations of interest. No, none noted. Public questions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Received apologies from Councillors Hoban and Councillor Woodbine. Councillor Lancaster is here as a substitute.
Okay. Have we got any urgent business?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So we've done public minutes of previous meeting. Okay, all in favour, yeah? Right, that's passed. Thank you very much. So now we move on to item number 6, which is Crompton and Royton Golf Club, High Barn Street, Royton.
Thank you, Chair. This application, as stated, is for the Royton Golf Club, and it's for the reprofiling of the existing driving range and adjacent golf holes with the importation of dry inner fill material, improvement of the existing access track, the creation of a new driving range facility with covered shelter, creation of new course holes, improvement to the existing course and alterations to 3 existing holes, including the change in levels, alterations to the putting greens, new water features and landscaping. The application site is the eastern part of Royton and Crompton Golf Club. It's off High Barn Road. The proposal will take place on the 15th and 16th hole. The 15th hole is positioned right at the south end of the site as you're looking there. And there's a short hole which is to the southeastern corner, goes from the southeastern corner to plays in a direction to the northwest. The application site is located within the greenbelt and it is bounded on 3 sides by existing residential properties on Greencroft Meadow, Spring Valley Farm, and to the northwest on the aerial view there. That's the development taking place. Obviously, the aerial photos get updated progressively, and that's phase 1 of the Cowley Shore development. So I'll take you through some site visit photos. So this is the entrance. The bottom right photo is externally from Cowley Shore Lane, and the top left is internally looking out. And then these photos here show it's the bottom right corner, and that's the groundkeeper's area at the minute. The bottom photo and the right hand side, you can see their existing outbuildings that are used for the storage of their machinery. But the left hand of that image, which is then shown in the top 2, is where this development intends to provide their welfare and storage of materials and vehicles. These photos here show within the site. The top left photo is showing hole 15. The top right hole is showing a view towards up towards hole 16, and then the bottom photo on the right hand side is hole 17, and the driving range is to the left. The next set of photos, the bottom photo taken first is looking across the area of land that is owned by the golf club, where they're going to create an additional hole, and at the bottom of the photo there is phase 1 of Cowlishaw. And then the top right photo looks to the north of the application site, across that piece of land where the hole is going to be created, and that's the Denby Railway development that is under construction and near completion. And then finally, the top left photo looks across to the left of where the driving range is as it is now. These final photos are taken just to further show the relationship between where the topographies will change and the existing developments. Just to show you in more detail what's going on. So we'll take the right hand photo first, because that's the most southern point. So in the right hand corner you can see the two buildings that exist now, which is where the groundskeepers are. Hole 15 goes along the bottom of that edge of the development, and then hole 16 plays to the north, and then you can see the creation of the driving range above that. And then if you look at the left hand image, which stacks above that, you can see the continuation of the driving range on the far right, and you can see the creation of the hole at the most northern point of the application site. This shows you what the shelter will be for the driving range. And then this is these sections, there's two slides, and they basically show the changing levels across the site. These ones on this slide show west to east across the site, the changing levels. You can see that there's a smaller image to the right, and it's quite hard to show on here, but I can go into it in more detail if anyone has any questions about it. And then this one shows north to south, cutting through the section of that entire area of the eastern element of the application site. The application is for the recommendation of approval subject to conditions. There are some alterations to the report listed in the late list. Firstly, in relation to paragraph 2, section 2, which relates to the recommendation, there's a note there about a lifting of an objection from the A. That had been lifted, and that's proposed to be changed. And then we've had an additional objection from a neighbouring neighbouring site to the east, which is the Cowlishaw end, and that relates to drainage issues associated with the reprofiling works. As part of the late list, there's comments and conditions proposed from the lead local authority from the council, who've raised no objections subject to conditions in terms of sustainable drainage and meeting of the submitted FRA. The applicant raised some comments in regard to the application in terms of condition 4 regarding the constructive environmental management plan. However, having regard to the information submitted, the council deems that we just need a little bit more, and it's not sufficient to remove that condition. In regards condition number 14, that's been amended, having regard to what the applicant has stated, saying that they have no intention to erect any external lighting. However, given the works that are going on and some comments in some of the other details submitted, at some point there may need to be some external lighting whilst the works take place, so the condition's been reworded to allow that, subject to further details being submitted if it is required by the applicant. And that's it, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hartness, are you? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just been looking through some of the highways objections. Some of them relate to Cockermill Lane and it being a single track, and then in terms of using that for the entrance for construction. Now, I suppose like the changes on the application are probably not going to increase going forward when it's developed lots more traffic, but in terms of construction, is that the only possible place they can use for the construction? And if so, is there enough mitigation, do we feel, to ensure that that's safe to use.
The access is existing. They use it for the grounds maintenance vehicles now. Cockermill Lane isn't a single track. Cockermill Lane is two lanes. Part of what Matthew said sort of applies here. So the construction management plan will include details of things like, which will alleviate some of the concerns, I think, of things like wheel wash, making sure that the people working on the site park within the site, and so they're not obstructing Cockermill Lane. And they didn't really show us that, and the management of the construction vehicles. So that should hopefully, well, it will be included in the construction management plan.
Just to add on what Wendy said, there is agreement on the matter about the parking internally, but it's not particularly well shown in the document. We want that improved to obviously maintain that. And the other one is there's controls that have already been agreed in terms of the hours of when it's going to take place, the works will take place, and also some consideration within the construction management plan about the school times and High Barn Road and things like that. Obviously this is well away from High Barn Road, but it's not that far away, and the applicant is aware of that and has agreed to that in principle.
I'm sorry, just if I could just pick up on a point. In terms about the driving range, is that a new driving range or replacing an existing one?
So as you can see on the photo here, I'll try and get the pointer up so you see a bit better. So is that there? So this area here in the red, that is the existing driving range facility. So for that, it is a facility that the users of the golf club have the option to use. However, I think they would openly admit that it's not necessarily something that's up to par that you would expect for an aspiring golf course, and they're looking to improve that. Currently now in that area there is a concrete pad with tee off areas, but obviously the idea of the part of the works is to improve that facility and provide better facilities for both the people who use it now, but also what they could draw in once they improve the facilities. So for schools and things like that, and those details are covered in the submission.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions? No. Would anybody like to debate or raise any points, or shall we go straight to the vote? Yeah, that's fine. Do I get a mover for approval? All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to item 7. I can't pronounce this, so you're going to have to help me. The Vestacare Centre, the Vestacare Stadium in Hollingwood. If we could move on to that, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So the application is for variation of some of the conditions attached to a previous permission on the site. The application is before committee this afternoon because the land is owned by the council and there are some objections to the proposal. So that's the site location there on the screen. It's the Vestacare Stadium located on White Bank Road in Oldham. The site is actually surrounded by residential properties. To the north of the site is a conservation area, and it is actually within the green belt. So that's an aerial view of the site with the pitch in question now in situ. So the application is to vary some of the conditions attached to the use of the pitch. There are conditions relating to restrictions on the use of the pitch and relating to the use of the floodlights. So the current application is to vary the use of the pitch to allow the applicants to hold some events for 4 days in a year during the summer months, and then to also vary the use of the floodlights for an extension in hours. At the moment, the floodlights are only allowed to be used up until 10 p.m., but the applicant is looking at extending that to 11 p.m. So in terms of the material and planning considerations relating to the proposal, the first to be considered is the principle of the development. Given the current use of the site, it's considered that the proposed events would not be too dissimilar to the established lawful use of the site, and in that regard, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in principle. As I mentioned earlier, the site is within the green belt, so we've also assessed the impact on the openness of the green belt, but because there is no inclusion of any permanent structures as part of the proposal, so it's considered that the proposal would not have any significant adverse impact on openness of the green belt or the general character of the area. Then in terms of neighbor amenities, the main potential issue is considered to be noise disturbance as a result of the nature of the proposed events. At the moment, there isn't a lot of information on the events that will be held, so we are recommending some conditions to mitigate any potential adverse impact on neighbor amenity. Then in relation to highway issues, the applicant has advised that the potential number of spectators will be pretty much as that of the existing use of the site, and therefore it's unlikely that the proposal would generate any significant additional highway issues. All the same, a traffic management plan would have to be submitted before any event is held on site. So consulting comments, Sport England, no objection. Highway, no objection, all subject to condition. Environmental health, also no objection. When the committee agenda was published, the applicant raised some issues that they wanted us to address and bring before committee, and those issues have been, circulated to members in the late item papers. One of the issues actually relates to the extension of the period during which the events could be held. The original conditions we attached to, we recommended, were for the events to take place between June, July, and August, but they've requested that this be extended to include May and September. So it will now be May, June, July, August, and September. They also requested that we shouldn't, make specific reference to the use of the pitch for playing of football only, because there are some other events that, are held on the pitch, some other sporting events held on the pitch. So the relevant conditions have been, amended accordingly. So the late item papers include some amendments to some of the conditions recommended. So based on our assessment, we are recommending the application for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question around, obviously they want permission for 4 days. How are we going to monitor that? Because it'll be really difficult in terms of monitoring the aspect that is being used for 4 days in a year.
The first condition recommended there actually requires that an event management plan is submitted prior. That will be submitted every year prior to the use of the pitch for these events at all. So the permission is actually for 4 days in a year, and they will have to provide the dates those events will be held during the year. And any event held outside of those dates would obviously be unauthorized. So we should be able to monitor when the events will be held. Sorry, say again? They will have to submit the the event management plan to us for approval before the events are held. So when the event management plan is submitted, then we will have to consult environmental health and the highway authority. So if they are happy with the proposals within the event management plan, then we will grant permission for them to use the pitch for those events.
Sorry, just from my perspective, any event has to be applied for in advance in any case, doesn't it? It goes through the events, doesn't it? Or not necessarily planning. I'm just because I'm taking on board what council's saying. Is it, you know, is there a body within the council that's obviously going to?
So I think what you're referring to is when there's council-led events, and obviously that will go through a particular department. But no, when a private body wants to have an event, obviously as long as they comply with all the relevant planning legislation and the other legislation they have to adhere to, that's their responsibility. They go ahead and do it. I think in terms of what Councillor Akhtar was saying, if there are more than 4 events in any point, or if they go beyond the hours of operation for a standard non-event day, then obviously if that's reported to us, we can investigate it. In terms of what Abiel's referring to in terms of the event management plan, that's what we're introducing as part of the planning process, to be clear that because we're limiting it to 4 days, we want to see details in advance. We want to be able to consult with environmental health and highways and make sure that what they're proposing is not going to have any additional adverse impact than what we have assessed for a typical event in this situation, and therefore confirm in that given year, yes, they can go ahead with those 4 events and only those 4 events beyond in those hours beyond 10 and 8.
Does that answer?
Us, yes.
So we've established it is monitored, and if there is a break from that, or then it can be reported and investigated and action taken accordingly.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor?
It's a similar notice. I mean, I know about events because I plan them myself. But I'm looking at this. If it's coming to planning, you will speak to highways. So will there be a traffic management plan in place as part of the event? Will you, like events do, consult neighbours? Because when there's an events notice goes in, the neighbours are consulted if there's an issue with a highway.
So no, I mean, obviously we're putting this condition in place for planning reasons. So we just want to be sure that we're seeing what's being proposed on those 4 days, that it's not creating any further planning issues. So it's effectively a discharge of condition element, or satisfying that condition in terms of giving us the information that we need as a planning authority to be comfortable with it. So no, we wouldn't necessarily consult neighbours on the event plan.
But so that's the planning side. They give you the 4 dates, and then obviously when these events come up, they've got to apply as an event. Am I reading this right? They would have to apply as
No.
So basically, so by granting this, we're giving them 4 days within their months where they can put on what they want.
From a planning point of view, yes. In terms of other legislation that covers event, I'm not aware of what they would have to do in that situation. As far as I'm aware, because it's a private property, they wouldn't need to.
Depending on what they're doing, they may require an authorisation under the Licensing Act.
Right.
But that would depend on what they're doing and what their current premises licence allows them to do. Because if they're things like boxing events and things like that, they're licensed under the Licensing Act. Their licence may already allow that, I don't know. But that's what it would be, licensing.
I think we might get some information on that when the agent. Sorry, Councillor Murphy.
I'll just take this opportunity to apologise to the committee for my lateness. Unfortunately, work got in the way. I'm just going to throw one out there. Is there an option to put in temporary planning permission for 1 year to make sure that what they're actually asking for doesn't have an adverse effect on the residents? Because that would be a way to solve it, wouldn't it?
So in terms of what the applicant has applied for, no, because they've not applied for temporary permission. And I think, and we have, as a committee, we have to consider the application before us. So I think, you know, obviously we've assessed it as officers. It's a, you know, for 4 days a year, it's a relatively small change in terms of the hours of operation, the hours of the floodlighting. And we're assessing it from that planning impact of that those 4 days a year, just those few hours extra. So I think it's not reasonable for us to necessarily push back on that. But I say, ultimately, we have to assess the application we've applied for, and that's not for a temporary permission.
But just for my knowledge, the event is key. I mean, you can have an hour's operating as what they're doing out with football, or they could have on a circus or a festival or whatever, and they're very different things. And is there any way of, from a planning point of view, of why we're here determining that and what effects that would have?
So that's why we have the condition. So if the event management plan comes in, as I said, we'll consult with highways, we'll consult with environmental health on that to ensure that what they're proposing in terms of events is not exceeding what we would have expected for an event in this location.
So there's still safeguards in place? Yeah. Okay. Would you like... Sorry?
Yeah, just a couple of clarifications. In terms, is it 4 events per year, not 4 events per month? Per year, right? Okay, that's yeah. Not one of your colleagues I was asking is fit for, right? And the second one is, obviously they've asked for sort of permanent permission, but as a committee, can we not suggest that is for a year, like Councillor?
No, that's what I'm saying. Because they've applied for a permanent permission, that's what we have to consider.
Could they not change their mind? We could ask the applicant. I think the present today on this.
You couldn't really change here and now at committee. The application's already been in. We've already been assessed on it. I think, you know, if they wanted to apply for temporary permission, they would have applied for temporary permission.
Can permission be removed afterwards if you don't breach conditions?
No. What we can do is if there's a breach of condition, or a consistent breach of condition, we can look at enforcement action. But once a permission is granted, a permission is there. And as long as they comply with that permission, including the conditions, it's okay.
Councillor?
So you said the breach of conditions is on a regular basis, or like they have a one-off in the instant more than what they're supposed to be doing. So how would you monitor that?
Yeah, so essentially what we're saying here is the condition that would require an application before any of these events takes place, with all the details around that, is to make sure that once the details of those events are known, that there's measures in place and the scale and quantum of that event is known and shared with us. And then, as has been said before, we'll consult with colleagues in highways, environmental health, and then assuming we're in a position to agree those details, if there is any then subsequent breaches of this scheme and details that we've approved, then ultimately it becomes a potential planning enforcement matter. So that's the framework in which we have to consider those details.
Chair, can I just finish on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
If the breach is a continual breach.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at worst case scenarios there. So obviously the permission would still be in place. There are more extreme enforcement powers and tools available, like things like injunctions and so on, but I don't think we'd end up in a position of using those, because it's my understanding that the council owns the land anyway, so there may be breaches of the lease, for example, where the council might have some other powers outside of the planning process to rectify any repeated issues.
So my understanding is then in 4 days we will man it, we will plan it and see how things get on, and if they do break, there's the ways of going down and action-wise as well. So that's fine, that's good, thank you.
And it's in their interest to make sure that they are complying, because they won't want to have issues every year when they're coming back to us with details.
That's fine.
Because if there's any events that, to learn from, let's say, issues that arise with them, we wouldn't want to repeat of those for future events. So for any events the following year, for example, we'd make sure that they were mitigated for, to avoid any issues that do occur.
Thank you.
Councillor?
It's just a query, because you mentioned about conditions on the events notice, the one that's coming to you. Is there any way you can put a condition that they actually consult or somehow notify neighbouring properties?
Yeah, just to clear, we're not saying there's a condition on the event notice. We're saying the requirement to have that event notice is a condition on this permission. So we require them to give us the notice with the plan of the 4 years, and that's part of a condition on this application, on this permission, if the committee grant it tonight.
Hurley?
The word festival is the one that's freaking me out just a little bit with this. And you shouldn't say like for like, but anywhere where there's a festival, it never just runs to 1 day, it always runs into 2. Is there a likelihood that these 4 days could be 4 days altogether, or 2 lots of 2 days, which would cause problems for the people who are living there if there was a music festival that was running for 2 days and traffic? I just can't see anyone putting on a music festival, putting up outdoor tents and all that for 1 day.
So I think some of these questions are ones that you're probably better addressing to the applicant when they come to speak. But in terms of the planning and what they're applying for, that's part of what they would need to submit for the event management. So we understand what exactly they're wanting to do. I say we'll consult the environmental health, we'll consult the highways, so that they can give us an input on any issues around, if it was, say, a 2-day event like you're saying, and manage that appropriately therefore. So I don't, can I say if there's a likelihood or not? No, I can't, because I'm not in control of it. It's a private operator.
But is the possibility valid that they could come and say, we want to use all our 4 days in one hit?
If they wanted to do that, and that was part of the management plan, and if our highways and environmental health colleagues had no concerns about that from their angle, that's a possibility, yes.
Right, okay.
A couple of questions, actually. Sorry. The first one is, have they ever breached the conditions that they have now to turn the floodlights off at 10 o'clock? You know that?
None has been reported to us. Usually it's in the environmental health that starts with the monitoring of that. But for us, we haven't received any breach of conditions information at all.
Right.
So
I think ultimately, we don't have the information before us. I'm aware there have been complaints to us before, not necessarily about floodlighting or hours of operation. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go and look it up. But I know there has been complaints in the past. I'm not aware of any recently, to be clear. So, but yeah.
I think the ward councillor who's going to speak will possibly provide some flesh on that bone. Do we have any?
Thanks, Mark. For instance, if they get planning permission today for 4 events, and they do their 4 events in first 8 weeks, and they apply for a 5th one, or anybody else that goes and hires a venue and wants to do a 5th event on 10 months down the line, are you going to consider the application form? Or are you going to say, sorry, we've given you permission for 4 and that's it? Thank you.
So they couldn't do a 5th event under this permission, or if that's what you grant. If they want to apply in future for through another planning application to extend it to 5 days or 6 days or whatever it might be, that's a new application. We can't stop them submitting an application like that. Obviously, how we would consider that, I'd look at it at that time. I can't, without having that application before me, I can't advise on how we would consider it.
Do you want to, yeah?
So basically, if they keep the nose clean, the events do well, they're happy to do as many as they want. Right, okay.
Do you want to just clarify, Peter, just so we're clear on
So what's being applied for is for 4 days a year to have events that would mean the hours of operation of the property and the hours of operation of the floodlights would be extended on those 4 days alone. That's all. If you grant permission tonight, that is all it is being granted permission for, and even that is subject to conditions such as the event management plan.
Councillor.
It's just the precedents that we're setting here that concerns me. Are we given similar permissions elsewhere in terms of that the event management sort of application comes to planning and you assess it and you pass it on to the environment? I'm just a bit concerned about the workload being provided to planning and because you're already being stretched as it is.
So again, let's separate the two things out. There are event management processes that any event or many events have to do, as Alan set out. That's completely separate. In terms of it, I'm not aware of us having introduced a condition like this elsewhere in the borough, but I've not had many applications like this in my time here, to be honest with you, but so I don't know for sure. But in terms of am I comfortable us asking for this condition in this case? Yes, because that's part of the process that I want to ensure, because of the concerns that you're raising, that other residents have raised through the objections, that we are able to manage it from a planning point of view and ensure it's in place. Will I necessarily want this on every other application that's similar to this? Not necessarily. It depends on the situation. Every application on its merits. I think it depends on the details that are given to us and on what the context of the site is and who's affected and what the objections we've received. In this case, in light of all the information we've received, we think it's reasonable to have a condition like this so that we can try and manage it as best we can.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of my colleagues with the questions are getting confused. The planning is only for the 4 days. They have an event management plan that they have to produce for them to look before it can be passed. And I think some of the questions were, what happens to the 5th, 6th? I mean, if that's something comes forward, that's something new planning. But we can only make a decision on what's been brought to the table is actually on them 4 days and with the restrictions applied. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call forward the objector, Mr. Glennon. Have we met before, Mr. Glennon?
Many times, Chair.
I thought you looked very familiar. Yeah.
Ex-officer of the council. And
right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Sorry. Anyway. So you'll know the routine then.
I will do. Yeah.
Okay. So you got 3 minutes when you press the buzzer, and the time is yours. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. Good evening, committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of local residents. This is an application which seeks permission to allow up to 4 unspecified events to take place during the summer months, up to 11 p.m. at night. We don't know what those events are. It's been alluded to in the officer's report. It could be music festivals, it could be beer festivals, it could be boxing events. We have no idea. This committee is being asked to grant permission for unspecified events, irrespective of the controls that officers think are acceptable. It's a wing and a prayer. We are in a fait accompli position should this application be approved. The application hasn't been supported by professional technical documents to demonstrate that there will be no adverse impact. Again, this is something your officers think can be done by way of condition. This committee doesn't have the support and the confidence that such events can take place without this happening. This isn't an application for just 4 events a year. It's the other straw that brought the camel's back. This is a facility which has operating hours far in excess of any other facility within the borough. You only have to look at Crompton House, 3G pitch, Royton Crompton 3G pitch, and also Little Wembley. There will be members on this committee who will remember the Little Wembley application being considered in March 2024. There were far more stringent controls employed in terms of hours of operation and also a noise control condition. There is no such condition on this permission, but should committee feel necessary, because this is an application made under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act, they can impose conditions that they see fit. This application will, on behalf of residents concerned, result in significant adverse impacts. It will have a detrimental impact on their amenities. This is something they already have to endure. It's something which in my professional opinion, isn't acceptable and should not be approved. And just picking up on one of the points that was raised by officers, as this is a council-owned facility, and obviously this is something Mr Evans can no doubt comment on, I find it incredible that the council would actually take enforcement action against itself should there be a breach of condition. I'll be happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gareth. You're okay with Gareth, are you?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was very enlightening. Have we got any questions? It's just for me, and I think it's not part and parcel of it, but it would be fair to say there has been issues with residents and this facility in recent times, hasn't it? In terms of, and what I'm talking about is in terms of communication, in terms of interaction, etc.
Quite right, Chair. And I think the other thing as well to bear in mind, and apologies if I didn't mention it, but this is up to 11 p.m. It doesn't then cover the cut-off period in terms of people actually leaving the facility. So we're not talking 11 o'clock solely. It's possibly half past 11, 12 o'clock at night. And again, this is something which happens at the moment. There's a cut-off point, but there is then that period of people leaving the facility to, go elsewhere.
Thank you.
There's a number of residents who sort of live on White Bank, yeah.
So when they're playing football or something, is it pretty loud?
Yes, you can hear it in the back. Being brutally honest, my parents live on White Bank. Okay. I've grown up on White Bank, and when I go down on the summer, you can hear it from the back garden if you sort of got some nice weather.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just coming in, Alan, is it a council-owned facility?
It's council-owned land. Yeah.
Right. So do they lease the land off the council?
Yes.
So do they not have to still do then the events notice procedure like everybody else has to do?
It's probably something you might want to ask the applicant when they're in the seats,
Right,
but
okay.
I'm not a fay with events licensing procedures.
Any further? Ladies first. Thank you.
Hi, I'm not very au fait with the area. Can you tell me about the parking? Where do the people park who use that facility?
Is it easy to stand up, Chair? Yeah, thank you. So at the moment, as you come down Elm Road, you then turn onto White Bank, so there's a small car park just here, and there's a surface level double car park just in front of the facility. So if these are full, then there is sort of on-street parking. The ward council will be able to sort of tell you.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
I just want to ask, this is predominantly, well, this facility is in essence a sports facility, isn't it? It's not, you know what I mean? It's designed for, I think it was rugby and football really, wasn't it? It's not, you wouldn't say it would be accustomed to facilitate wider activities.
No, ever since I've sort of grown up, it's been there. It was a football pitch, and then obviously, the previous incumbent, Oldham Town, came along, sort of developed the facility. It was a public inquiry, which, sort of allowed them to do that. And then probably 6-7 years ago, this is when the application for the 3G pitch came in. So at that point, the use actually intensified from being a grass pitch. It then became, sort of enabled to be used more often because it's a 3G facility.
Thank you for that, Councillor.
There's a boxing club on there as well. So in terms of, the actual organisation that manages the pitch, etc., do you have any concerns regarding them? In terms of, have you had issues in the past that have caused disturbance in the area?
It would be unfair of me to say that because I've not been involved in that. My mum and dad have sort of told me anecdotally various different things, but I think that's better coming from the ward councillor, to be honest.
Well, thank you, Gareth. Thank you for that, and thanks for your time. So if we could ask the agent, Mr. Simons. How are you today, Matthew? You okay? Good. So you get your 3 minutes, and you press the button. You're starting in your own time, yeah? Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Matthew Simmons, I'm a planning consultant and I became agent for this application a few months into the process. As your officers have said, the 2016 permission was for the replacement of grass football pitch with a 3G pitch. That permission was granted subject to conditions, including 2 relating to hours of operation. The first required the floodlighting to be switched off at 10 PM Monday to Friday and 8 PM Saturday and Sunday. The second, the use of the pitch to stop at 10 PM Monday to Friday and 8 PM Saturday and Sunday. This application is only asking for the pitch to be used and the floodlights to stay on until 11 PM on 4 days each year. We're only talking about an extra hour on a Friday and an extra 3 hours on a Saturday or Sunday, and for only 4 days during the summer months when the days are longer. The reason for the slight extension of time is so that the club can hold up to 4 events each year. When I first met with the club's chief operating officer, he was keen to stress the proposals are not designed to increase profit or anything like that, but rather the money received from the events will be used to develop the community facility and to keep subs low for junior sections, which is key to keeping children involved in football. And of course, there are associated social and health benefits linked to that. The 4 events, as stated in the report, will be spread out from May to September. There may be a presentation evening, a music event, or a beer festival, the type of events you'd usually associate with a sports club. You'll note from the late info paper that the club asked that the permission allows events to take place May and September, and this is linked to the boxing gym at the club. The boxing season starts in September, I'm told, and ends in May, so the club may look to hold a boxing event in these 2 months. Of course, officers have recommended a condition that requires the event management plan to be submitted in advance of the events being held, and the club will need to tell the council what type of event will be taking place and on what date. The management plan will be tailored to suit those proposed events and controlled by the council via the discharge of condition process. The management plan will cover matters such as noise, traffic, waste, with the wording of the condition enabling the council to require details on any other matters deemed necessary as well. Importantly, the condition also confirms that the number of people attending the events shall not exceed the level of matchday spectators. There will not be a greater number of people travelling to or attending the events than would be expected for the bigger match days, and the council will control the noise. The conditions being imposed ensure that the council retains control over the events, which will in turn ensure that the amenities of neighbouring residents are protected on each of the 4 days. Thank you. I hope this gives you sufficient comfort to follow the officer's recommendation and grant approval. Thanks for your time, and I'd be happy to try to answer any of the questions.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I got 3 events there that you potentially suggested. There's a beer festival, a boxing event,
yeah,
a music event.
Yeah.
I can't pick up on the other one. I don't know if anybody else did.
Sorry, I said presentation evening.
A presentation evening as well.
End of season presentation evening. They may have something like that on a stage on the pitch.
So that gives us so when we're considering this now, that gives us now a little bit more idea of what we're going to consider either approving or not approving, doesn't it?
Yeah, those are set out in the report as well, I think. Those.
Okay, I'm just making the point about them because, you know, alarm bells start to ring, I would have thought, for those events if you live in the area, don't they? But anyway, we'll see how it pans out, what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I mean, there's the condition control in it all. That's the officers have rightly put on condition number 1, the event management plan, so that they can tell us, no, go away, you can't do this if you're not going to align with our requirements on traffic and noise and everything like that.
Sorry, Councillor Davis. So, just for clarity, are you specifying that these 4 events will be them things you
No, we can't.
Are they just suggestions?
Yeah, we just wanted to give an idea of what might be expected.
So we could have a 4-day music festival.
I don't think the club's planning on a 4-day music festival.
Well, it's right. Can you provide? Is it?
I've not been told there are any intentions whatsoever of a 4-day music festival. And of course, again, the event management plan would have to be submitted earlier in the year. Even if the club did say we want to plan a 4-day music festival, the council could turn around and say, well, no, the events management plan's there, but we're not going to discharge the condition, you can't go ahead.
It's from the previous question. Do you currently put in an events notification because it's council-owned land?
I've just when you mentioned that just now, I texted my client and he said he's not aware of any requirement to do that.
Oh, they do if it's got a lease.
Peter, if you'd like
I
to.
think just to be clear, I appreciate the question and the concern, but ultimately that's a separate process. It's a licensing process. It doesn't go to planning. No, that's how we have to consider it in this instance. If they had to go through a separate licence process because it's council land.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the presentation that you gave, Mr. Simmons, you said that the events wouldn't be attended by a higher than would be expected regular match day attendance. Could you just give me an indication about what that number of attendees would be?
So 1,500 people. The ground can hold 1,500 people for match days at the minute. So that is what the condition is, ensuring that there will be no more than that at these events. So it wouldn't be a mass 4-day music festival attended by thousands of people. There would be 1,500 limited.
Okay, and the supplementary to that would be, is the venue in the habit of hosting regular events of that attendance up till 10 p.m. already? Or is that
at the
not
moment,
something that the venue is hosting?
Not that I'm aware of, other than the larger football games that go on. If there's an evening kick-off, they might be very well attended. It might go on until that time, I suppose. But nothing else on the pitch that I've been informed of.
Yeah, just clarity, which might be yourself or perhaps Peter. The fallback position is, so you could, in theory, just apply for events up until 10 o'clock anywhere in the current, with the current designation without this planning permission. Is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of the operating hours, the pitch could run until within those hours. Yeah, so we're just looking to extend that by, I think I mentioned, an hour here or 3 hours there.
Thanks, Chair. So getting back to this lighting, so currently it's set till 10 o'clock. So at 10:01, do them lights go off? Are they on timers or are they manually switched off?
I don't know if they're on timers, to be honest with you. I couldn't answer that, but when it was mentioned about any complaints being submitted about whether the club was breaching that condition, I texted the chair then. He's not aware of any. So as far as I know, so far the council hasn't been in touch with the club recently to say, look, these floodlights aren't being turned off on time.
Okay, can I follow up if I may, please? So the events that you've got planned, am I right in thinking they would be on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday possibly? Or are we talking any day during the week?
We haven't specified that they'd definitely be held on the weekends. But again, that's a matter for the event management plan that would have to be submitted in advance of the events. If they wanted to hold something on a Tuesday until the time we've asked for, then the council would have to approve that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor?
Yeah, I just needed some clarification in terms of the current permission that you've got in terms of using those floodlights. Those are only for the purposes of playing football, not for events, is it?
It's not football, it's as a sports pitch.
Yeah, as a sports pitch, for sports activities, not for events such as beer festival or music festival.
For sports pitch, yeah.
Chair, question?
Yeah.
Just after what my colleagues just answered, yes, the pitch is, the lights are on at 10 o'clock. So they will be remaining on to 10 o'clock. So you don't need any kind of permission if you do any kind of other event there at all. I understand the question was it just for use for football, but you could use it for anything else, couldn't you?
As a sports pitch, yeah. So it could hold a rounders event until that time when the floodlights get turned off, or rugby,
or handing out awards for the football players.
Yeah.
So that could be done as well to 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
and I think there was a point raised earlier about, the lights get switched off, but then everyone's still leaving. Well, for these sorts of events, people would probably have to leave in advance of 11 o'clock when the lights get switched off for health and safety reasons, because you can't have everyone vacating the club when it's not lit appropriately, the pitch.
Thank you, just want to clarify. Thank you.
Just a follow-up for me. So the events finish when the lights go out. So it couldn't go on till 2 in the morning in darkness?
No, that's it.
Right.
No,
sorry,
so that's it. I mean, there'd be health and safety all over that, I
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
I mean, that's separate to planning, isn't it? But yeah.
I just had that nightmarish thought in my head, so thanks for clarifying. Everyone with these prep head torches or whatever. Have we got any further questions?
It's the operating hours as well,
Yeah.
I think, is the condition
Okay.
on that as well.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much.
We've got a ward councillor who would like to speak on this matter. Councillor Wahid. How are you today, councillor? Good.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents. I won't go over some of the stuff that's already been repeated. I'll stick to the point in the sense that there's some key issues that we want to be looking at. The key issues before us are quite simple. Does this proposal meet the standard of evidence, fairness and scrutiny expected by this committee and required by planning law? The answer, respectfully, is no. When looking at scrutiny, the first thing that comes to mind is a noise impact assessment or event schedule, crowd dispersal strategy. We haven't got that in front of us to look at that. So it's not very fair for us to pass this waiting for that and we don't have any scrutiny over that, because once you pass it here, then it's down to the planning department to have a look at that. Are they going to take the residents' concerns to hand? The residents don't have a lot of confidence in that, simply from past experience. Gareth spoke a little about other sites, such as Little Wembley, Crompton House School is one, Royton and Crompton School. All of those, some of the timing which I'll emphasise to you guys is that during weekdays, Little Wembley is open from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. So lights go out at 9 p.m. Same thing with Crompton House. Weekends, it's 9 till, in Little Wembley again, it's 9 till 6 p.m. Whereas in Vestacare, it's 8 till 10 p.m. 5 days, Monday to Friday, and Saturday and Sunday and bank holidays, it's 8 till 8. So it's already, there's a big disparity in how we've treated this particular site to how other sites in this borough have been treated. There's no noise condition, whereas if you look at Little Wembley, there's condition 12 which imposes a 50 decibel noise cap at the boundary. And if you look at behind here, it's not that clear, but if this is the stadium and these are the houses here, and there's a little bit of parking here, there's some parking which has been made available there, and there's been a lot of problems in terms of parking on this road, on White Bank Road. And we've had really extensive meetings with the council following a lot of complaints where, quite honestly, the residents feel like they've been ignored. The club itself has not done itself any kind of favours. There's many options that have been put on the table for them, such as putting extra, that land there over here is also been provided to the club by the council, and we've asked the club to develop car parking in that space so that that road is left clear. There's been many promises that have been breached, none have been adhered to. So again, there's not a lot of confidence from the residents from past experiences. So based on that, I asked this committee that you refuse this application because we haven't got the evidence. The main objectives that we need to look at to be able to scrutinise this application, we haven't got in front of us. So on that basis, I personally think that this should be rejected. If anybody's got any questions.
Do we have any questions for Councillor? Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a few mentions throughout the course of tonight's discussions about safeguards in place, so the condition around an event management plan and even looking at lease arrangements through sort of licensing perspectives. I just want to understand, perhaps maybe from your perspective, as to why those safeguards or those devices to hold the club to account to good practice, why you don't think they're sufficient?
Well, they're not sufficient because they've already been given so many. You know, the conditions that, or lack of conditions that have been set on this particular site. Yes, it's a pretty successful club, which is good. You know, that's what we want. But at the same time, the residents' opinions and their livelihoods and their amenities need to be also considered. They live literally opposite. The club has repeatedly gone past the 10 o'clock deadline, which is already a really sore point because it's nowhere else in the town has got that lengthier time frame, and it's not automatic switch off at 10 o'clock. It's been repeatedly breached way past 10 o'clock, and the complaints have been made and no enforcement has followed. So on that basis, there's really no track record from the council to say that any kind of conditions that are going to be put on will be enforced, because there's no track record of it. You know, so whether it's lighting, whether it's attendance, who monitors attendance? Who monitors how many people are going to go in there? You know that. So we haven't got that in front of us to scrutinise. So you know, what choice other than rejection can we go for?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I may then, as I understand it, the permissions that are in place and that are being sought, your view is that they're permissive in that they're not, the permissions given are not going to be monitored or enforced. So well, that's the source of your concern in relation to the.
Well, they haven't done.
Okay.
Haven't been done so far.
Ladies first.
Ask how many parking spaces is there?
Not enough. Really not enough. The thing is, that should be something which the applicant brings on. They should be able to tell us, okay, how many parking spaces there are, how many they're going to expect. But we haven't got that detail.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. It's good to speak to you. You mentioned, what's it called, that there's been several complaints and people have been failing. Do you have any record, numbers of these kind of complaints? Have they been registered? Have they had the feedback? Anything at all, so we can.
Yes, I mean, there's been nothing presented today, but.
No, but do you have any numbers of the residents you've spoken to?
Well, I can tell you personal ones which I've been involved in. Since I've been elected, it's been about 4 different occasions which these breaches have happened. We've had a meeting in these premises with the residents as a group. Nothing's come from that as well. Maybe there's not been some very recent ones, maybe in the last 6 months, maybe not. But this is an issue which predates me coming into office. So I've been elected 2 years, but this matter has been going on for maybe 3 to 4 years, possibly.
So on just going off the figures, I mean, we can't go off prehistory ones because we have no record of these complaints. In the last 2 years, as you've been a councillor, you had 4 complaints which you've spoken to the people about.
Clearly, yes.
And what were these complaints about?
About floodlights and also antisocial behaviour, some of them, which I know it's not a planning issue.
One thing I'm more interested in the floodlights. So what was it? They're going off 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock? Did they go off, or was it 11?
After 10 o'clock.
So how far after 10 o'clock did they go off?
Well, there's been occasions where it's gone on for another 20 minutes, half an hour.
Minutes. Okay. So substantial time going off on the 4 occasions.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor?
Just to make a point what Councillor Hayes said about them breaching conditions. I mean, I did taxis over the weekends. There's been many occasions where I'm picking people up to midnight from there, from that place when they've had events. So yes. Just some points we noted.
One thing to note as well is that in these meetings which we had with residents and council and the club, there was issues with obviously the parking issues, because there's not enough parking on site, off roads parking to be able to cope. So they park on the roads, and often what happens is where Elm Road comes around here, there's a grass village there. Everybody will park on there and then even park on here, which there's not enough space for two vehicles to pass by. It's quite a narrow road. Pardon?
Quite dangerous then.
Yes, and the club did promise that they're going to warden it, so that there's a permanent warden on these nights, and it's not followed through, to be honest.
Okay. Any further points? Yeah. In when we have the. Thank you, Councillor. I'll give you 10 minutes before you back up. Thank you. Yeah, Peter will come in first, and then.
Before obviously ask any further questions you have of us, before you do a discussion about it, just wanted to come back on a few things that have been raised and just clarify the position again from a planning point of view. So, the issue of noise has been raised, and whether there should be a noise condition and that kind of thing. So first of all, in terms of the condition that's proposed on the event management plan, it does specifically say that as part of that event management plan, there would need to be a noise management plan. So we are covering that. Secondly, in terms of noise, that again, we're having to compare. What you're looking at here is not a brand new application. You're comparing to what is permitted now, what happens legally under that permission now, with what is being asked for. So again, we've heard already that sometimes there is noise from football matches that is heard in back gardens of properties. So the fact that there is noise, and there might be noise from events, is not dissimilar. As long as that noise obviously is within legal limits, and that's where, again, in any event, irrespective of planning, if noise is excessive, that can be reported to the council's environmental health department, to the point for that to be investigated and see if there's been any harm in that respect. So just being clear on that in terms of noise, I feel we have covered it in the condition, but I say you have to compare what's there now with what's going to be from a noise point of view. From a parking point of view, which has come up, again, we've heard tonight already several times, the capacity of events will be the same as for football matches or other sports events. So parking is not something that is changing as a result of this application. It's not a matter that is impacted by this application simply to extend the hours of operation. Use of lights, just to clarify on that, because there's talk about use of lights for sports only. Again, being clear on this, the existing condition simply says the floodlights illuminating the 3G pitch shall not be illuminated outside the hours of 8 AM and 10 PM, Monday to Friday, and so forth. It doesn't say it shall only be illuminated for sports matches. If the club wanted to, they could have the lights on from 8 AM till 10 PM, Monday to Friday, every day, 8 AM till 8 PM on Saturdays and Sundays, every day, if they wanted to. Of course they wouldn't do. Why would they? It's a waste of money. But my point is, that's what they're allowed to do, irrespective of what event is taking place or what activity is taking place. So again, the comparison we're making is an extra hour on weeknights, an extra 3 hours on weekends for the floodlights. And similarly, again, on hours of operation, it's been talked about, there's been comparison to other pitches around the borough. That's not relevant. You're comparing it to what they have permission for now. It may be they have longer hours than some of the pitches. I wasn't here when this permission was originally granted. I don't know what the particular circumstances about why it was in that situation allowed to be till 10 PM on a weeknight, but it is. So the comparison is 11 PM on a weeknight now for 4 nights of the year, potentially.
Thank you. I suppose my thoughts are, from the application, is suggesting, and it's been acknowledged, a change of use of events from sports to other things, which may or may not be considerable. And the other thing I'm sort of thinking is, if this application didn't get approved, the operators could still apply for said events through events or whatever, couldn't they? So it's not like by rejecting this application we're saying you cannot have it's not happening. It just means you will have to apply for these individually, and they will be then judged individually rather than. I know there is some crossover with that, but there is still an avenue for these events to happen, but they'd just be scrutinised under a different method. Would that be fair to say, Peter?
you want me to repeat?
Yes, I'll do.
Okay, so what I'm saying is two elements to this. Okay, they're an existing sports facility, yeah, and the lights go on till 10 o'clock for sport matters, yeah, sport events, okay, sport activities. It's been suggested and indeed confirmed that the reason for this application is not for sports purposes, which is essentially what residents and the ground's been thinking. But the thing I'm getting at is, if this application is refused, the operator still has the opportunity and the channel to apply for these events, so they can still happen, but it just means they'd have to go through a different process. Is that correct?
I think it comes back to my earlier answer, as depending on what they're permitted to do under the Licensing Act. They'll have. I know they've got permission to do certain things because we've had them at the licensing panel previously. They could have applied for temporary event notices to conduct things under the licensing regime. Yeah. Obviously, we're looking at the planning regime. Right. But so if they did that under the licensing regime, they may get permission for that, but it would be contrary to the potentially contrary to their planning permission. So there'd be a conflict between the two.
You've confused me.
Well, is that the thing? That's a problem that with the legislative framework, you've got two different regimes dealing with certain issues, and there's a conflict between them.
So are they mutually exclusive?
Well, you try and get them to be matching, but they are completely separate.
Councillor Lancaster, and then we'll go to Councillor Agnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But as I understand the conversation which has just been conducted there, the licensing panel and the licensing team here at Oldham Council would not grant a licence for an event which contradicted existing planning permissions. So the licensing panel wouldn't say that an event could be held till 11 p.m. if the planning permission said that the lights had to be turned off at 10 p.m. Is that correct?
It would be something that they would take account of. I couldn't go any further than that, but that would be something that they would have to do.
Yeah, I think it's more or less covered, but Alan's sort of said something there, and I thought Peter clarified earlier, made the point that a non-sport event could be applied for until 10 o'clock on that side. So if they wanted to do a music festival, they could hold a music festival if licensing approved it until 10 o'clock anyway, and this would just mean that they could do it till 11. Is that correct?
That wasn't what I was saying earlier. I think in terms of what you're referring, I was saying was more to do with the event management plan as part of a condition if this permission was granted. I think in terms of whether the temporary license from an event could override what is allowed under planning, unless there are some permitted development rights that allow events, a certain number of events a year and events in situation like this, I think the restriction would still probably apply to the pitch, because obviously that's permission for sports pitch. Obviously they have a clubhouse, they have other space around the pitch that is, I think if I remember correctly, they've got a bar or eat food place in the grounds, or certainly there was during COVID. So, I think there are things that they can do around the pitch already. Yes, that with a temporary event licence they probably could do. The pitch is somewhat restricted, as I understand it.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just slightly confused with the licensing element, because I think we're getting a bit mixed up with licensing and event notifications. My understanding is licensing would be for, I don't know, beer being sold at such a venue at such a time. But the actual event notification will be, we're putting on an event, this is what we're expecting, this is the amount of people, this is going to have an impact on the highway, this is going to be the times, this is going to be our traffic management plan, and I think they're two separate things. So I'm just throwing that one out there, but I am going to go back to, I take it we're in the decision-making process now. Yes. Excellent, lovely. So the planning office has said that we should be judging this application on its own merit, and I am, but I can't help ignore that that may as well be Crompton House School. I can see a neighbouring estate, which may as well be Surrey Avenue, and I can see another neighbouring estate, which may as well be Grampian Way and Duchess Street. And as a ward councillor, I am acutely aware of the floodlighting issues. I'm acutely aware of the events that Crompton House put on. And what I am is not keen to mirror it here when we don't really have to. What concerns me, and I'm mindful about what the planning officers said, I'm mindful that they could do that now without planning permission. But what I haven't got and what I've not heard, it's on, say, a Friday night, it's on a Saturday night, and it'll be on a Sunday night, which gives residents a bit of respite. What I haven't heard is that categorically it'll be switched off at 11 o'clock to give residents that respite in case they've got work in the morning. There's too many. I'm not sure. They could if they want. It could be an event. It might be a sports event. It could be whatever event we want. So I'm going to move refusal, but I would be favourable if a temporary planning application came back for 1 year, and I would be minded at that point, but I would be open-minded for Alan's benefit on the next application to support it. And the reason why I'm sort of suggesting that is because we have then got something to work with for the next time. I am pretty confident that this committee before now, despite what the planning officers mentioned, I'm pretty confident that this committee before now has done temporary planning permission on the evening. If it's not a temporary planning application, I'm minded to move refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I just want to get some clarification for Peter, and then we're going to take a few more who've already indicated prior to your submission. Peter, can you categorically state, can we or can't we put a condition on this application as it stands in front of us to grant it for 12 months?
Okay, so to answer that question directly first, it is possible to do it, I'm advised. It's very rare that we would do it because obviously what's been applied for is a permanent application, and that's what the applicant has asked for. And if they're not prepared to do a temporary permission, then you're giving them a permission that they won't use. Secondly, there's got to be a justification for this in planning terms of moving away from why is a permanent permission causing the harm that means that we shouldn't be allowing that, and therefore we'd only allow a temporary permission. I think as well, if I can, on some of the other things that were mentioned, just in terms of, again, I appreciate the comparison to other schools and other places and what have you, but again, just to be really clear on this, let's say worst case scenario compared to what it is now. What we're assessing is nothing to do with other locations. It's in this location, in a worst case scenario, 4 days of the year, that would be weekends. If in the worst case scenario, you're changing the hours of operation to finish at 8 till 11 for the floodlights and for the hours of operation for the event. And lastly, in terms of issues that have been raised about or concern about lack of enforcement or lack of action if there's breaches, ultimately, I mean, this is what we deal with in planning all the time, in terms of we place conditions on things all the time, and sometimes they're breached. If we are notified, we will investigate. I said that at the start, it's the same here. If we are notified of consistent breaches of permission, whether it's the floodlights, whether it's hours of operation, whatever it might be, we will investigate.
So, just for clarity, it is possible?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, did you wish to speak?
Thanks, Chair. Okay, well, looking at this, my thoughts now are, we've got a football pitch, stroke rugby pitch. The rugby club used to play there. Now a rugby game goes on for 2 hours with an half time, maybe 3 hours with other stuff. The same with a football match. You may have a bit of kids training on there through the week, which I don't think you get a dead lot of trouble off the kids who are training, the boys and girls, even men and women. But we're looking here at something completely different. We're looking at potential. I know it's for 4 days a year, but these people live there. We're looking at all day and all night. It could be an all day and all night pop concert potentially. It could be, because it was suggested. It could be an all day and all night beer festival. These people live in those houses. They've got to put up with all that. If that's what happens, and that's what we're considering here. We're considering, is that what we want to approve and put those poor residents up to? And now I don't think it's fair. There's no parking in the area, and people will be coming and going. You may have 1,500 people, by the way, were mentioned, and I think it's going to be really difficult for the residents. You might have 1,500 at one time. A couple of hundred might go home, and they might replace them with a couple more hundred. I don't know. So those are my thoughts at the moment, and I'm extending the time of the lights to increase the time for events. I'm not so sure I approve of that as well. So we've got two applications in a way, haven't we? We've got extending the lights and extending the hours. So I'm not so sure about it personally, but let's see how everybody else says and where we come to. I think as well it'd be more clearer if we either voted for it or against it, personally.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor?
Thank you. I think most of my questions were answered by the planning office itself. We've got to base it on this planning, what we see in front of us. We can't compare it with other plannings because we don't know the history of them, the issues. We don't have nothing whatsoever. So one planning permission, the pitch will have separate planning permission, or I mean, opening hours. Compared to this one, we can't compare because we don't know that case whatsoever. We can't presume to say that they're going to be doing this, they're going to be doing this, they can do that, because we have an events manager plan in force, which will be checked and processed and the guidelines followed. So hence, it's 1 hour extra on the weekdays and 3 hours on the weekend. Parking, I mean, they're not expected, the 1,500 capacity there, they're not expecting more people to be arriving there. So hence, there's no reason for build any.
Well, I don't think they get 1,500
well,
pound, do they?
well, that's the capacity they have.
Yeah.
So I would, with the questions regarding planning itself, I think the officers have answered all the questions, and so has the agent itself, so I'll be more than happy to approve this planning.
Councillor Murphy? And then it's, sorry. Forgive me, please, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. You know, similar to Councillor Murphy, I've got some serious concerns about this application. And being long enough on the council myself, there's history to this site, a very long history. And if you spoke to previous councillors, Councillor Stretton was always raising issues about this site, and Councillor Williams. And they've been to the licensing panel. Alan has already alluded to that. You only go to the licensing panel if there's issues on the site. You don't go there otherwise. Obviously, licensing is a separate issue totally. So for me, even an hour extra, 4 days a week, we're talking about events, outdoor event. This isn't an indoor venue, it's an outdoor venue. And to have beer festivals, music festivals on there that could go on all day, like Councillor Davis said, and in the evening, personally, I think it's unacceptable in a residential area. So therefore, I want to sort of second Councillor Murphy's proposal.
Thank you. So just moving back to yourself, Councillor Murphy, you're rejecting it under what, for what reason?
When I didn't actually formally move refusal.
Sorry.
Just for clarity,
yeah,
what I actually said was I'm minded to vote refusal. And that minded was based on the evidence that the planning officer mentioned earlier, that we couldn't do temporary planning application. Now that he's clarified that we can, I'd just like to hear more of the debate, but I'm still minded for refusal, to see whether other members would be open to a temporary planning application to monitor the situation to make sure it doesn't have the detrimental impact that the objector ward councillor had, and to seek clarification that it's going to be a bed of roses, as it sort of suggests from the report, or the consultant, the speaker's comments. So I'm just just like to listen to more of the debate when it comes to a suggestion for a temporary planning application.
Councillor Cosgrove, sorry, it's these contacts lenses I've got. I need a new
It's just a
prescription.
query to Wendy. How many car parking spaces is there that's not on the highway?
I don't know the number precisely, but I'll just explain how I assess this application. So the venue has permission for sporting events for a certain up to, whether they meet those figures now, they've got the permission for up to a certain number of people. And when this application was first received, I had serious concerns myself about, say for instance, not from a noise point of view, but from a parking point of view, if we have a music festival, the pitch is full and the seating's full, which is very different from a sporting event like a football match where the seats are full, there are 22 players and then associated coaches and other staff. So that's why the wording in condition 1 is as it is, not exceeding the number of spectators. And the way I had to assess it was, it operates now with that number of parking spaces. I'm not saying it operates to everybody's satisfaction who lives there, but that's how I have to assess it. And it's for 1 extra hour, potentially, or 3 extra hours, just for 4 days. And it from a parking point of view, it wouldn't really have that much of an impact. And that's how I had to assess it.
Councillor Cosgrove?
The reason I'm asking is if the type of event changes, you've got people coming from outside the area more, so they're going to come in vehicles more. That is why I was raising the concern, because like kids with football and that, they probably walk there already in the kit and stuff like that, or football matches, they won't actually park on the ground. And that's where my concern is, you might have more traffic movement because they're coming from outside the borough in, or that was just the concern.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, if I can, Chair, I think it's a fair point. It's a very valid point to raise. I think, again, that's why we have the condition about the event management plan, so we can understand what event will it be, what will it generate in terms of traffic, what will it generate in terms of noise, and so forth. But I think the starting point, as Wendy has said, is they can already have that many people there. All of them could drive. We couldn't stop that. They could all park. Obviously, it's a primarily used as a sports facility at the moment, football particularly. You know, you get away fans, even not being disrespectful, but even at that level of the football pyramid, you get away fans driving in cars. So, you know, I think that's the point we're trying to make, is that it is just that comparison between how it is used now, and as I said earlier, and as Wendy just said, in a worst case scenario, 4 days a week, 3 hours extra. Now, if the committee feels that 3 hours extra on 4 days a week in a worst case scenario is so severe an impact, you're entitled to make that decision and that subjective assessment. Obviously, we've assessed it from our point of view and feel it doesn't tip it over that threshold, if you like. But you've got to consider it. And just, if I may, sorry, one final thing in terms of what Councillor Akhtar was saying. Again, we're not blind to the history. We're not blind to the issues there has been in the past, sometimes in the dim and distant past as well, with previous occupiers. But that's not a planning consideration. We never look at the applicant or how they've done things in the past when we assess an application. We assess what's on the plans and the proposals in front of us, which is a change from those hours there to those hours there for 4 nights a week. 4 nights a year.
Councillor Hurley.
Thank you, Peter. This is for you. before when you were explaining stuff to us, you said that the council would investigate if there was an issue. What does that investigation look like, and what would be the result of that investigation? Just say they were guilty and you found out that they'd been keeping the lights on till midnight. What would happen?
In terms of how we'd investigate, so take an example of the lights on or the hours of operation, which are the principal things in this application at the moment. It's got to be a consistent breach. So we've got to have that evidence that consistently they're going over the hours of operation or consistently keeping the lights on longer than they should do. In terms of if that was found to be the case, what we would do, obviously, first of all, we'd try and work with any person, we try and work with them and say, you know, come on, let's put something in place that you're not continuing to breach it, because any kind of formal enforcement action is a last resort. We don't want to take enforcement action, but we will do if we have to. In this case particularly, I think it's been alluded to before, because the land is in the council's ownership, the best, when I use the word enforcement action, in this case I'm using it loosely, informally, if you like, the easiest way to take enforcement action in a situation is as landowner, because there'll be certain terms in the lease that the club has to adhere to, and if they're not adhering to it under that, that's an easier way for the council to take action. But it would start with complaints to us. If we're getting the complaints saying repeatedly they're going over their hours, they're leaving the lights on, we will investigate it and we'll take it up with Alan in terms of the best way to take action if that's what it comes to.
So how many of those 4 times would they have to breach that for you to investigate?
4 times?
So the 4 times that's in front of us.
The four events, you mean? So that's slightly different. I was talking about hours of operation. In terms of the 4 is a max. If they could not do more than 4 events in a year.
But just say they breached it once.
Then that would immediately be investigated and we'd discuss it with Alan.
Consistent then, is it? If it's 4, it will be the minute they did it the first time.
You can never take enforcement action until it's been done, until something's been done that's breaching the permission. You can't preemptively. So that was referring to the hours of operation. So if they were consistently going over, even now, with the condition that they have now on the previous permission, if they were going over 8 p.m. on a weekend regularly with their operations and with their floodlights, and that was reported to us and we could investigate, and we found it was happening regularly, we would speak to Alan and we'd talk about what's the best way we can take action about this, given that it's council land.
But what about just these 4 that we're looking at today?
If they went over the 11, effectively. I think Martin alluded to it before, maybe it was Abiola, in terms of, because of the event management plan, that condition there, effectively the club will be putting themselves in a negative position with us when it comes to next year. Because the next year we were saying, well, hold on, you breached that last year. What are you putting in place to make sure that doesn't happen again? We can only ever react, say, to when it actually happens. But yeah, I think I've answered as best I can in terms of what you're asking.
Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, I think if it was just extending the hours by 4 hours, as you said, and that was it, but it's, as you alluded to, Chair, earlier, it is in a way a change of use, because you can use that pitch now, if this is passed, as well for non-sporting events, which then does mean that I think there is a material change in its usage, and obviously that noise and arcing, and I think there's quite a few things which make that a significant change, which means that I will be less sympathetic to that than I may have been if that pitch couldn't have been used for non-sporting events.
Thank you. Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that in the first condition there is an attempt to mitigate any adverse impacts through the condition for an event management plan, but I cannot foresee any floodlit event until 11 p.m, which wouldn't generate what I would consider to be an inappropriate additional level of noise and light pollution. So on that on that basis and the fact that it creates an adverse effect on the residential amenity, I'd be like to second Councillor Akhtar's proposal for refusal if I understood that he did propose that earlier on the basis of a adverse effect on the residential amenity due to excessive noise and light pollution.
Okay, so just for clarity, you've made well, are you happy to propose, Councillor Lancaster, on the reasons you've just given?
I can do. I thought a proposal for refusal was given earlier, but if
no,
you would like...
it was just a mindset rather than a proposal, if that's correct.
Right.
Well, mine was, Councillor Akhtar's was to second mine. So technically...
So he's seconding your mindset?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mine was minded to refuse it, not having the information already.
That's understood.
Councillor Akhtar was based on seconding it, and Councillor Lancaster would like to second it. Now, in theory, you've become the proposer, and you've become the seconder.
I'll just right. So just for ease, if Councillor Lancaster, if you'd like to propose on the basis of what you said, if Councillor, you could second.
I'm happy to oblige, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't mind playing first act or second act.
No, that's fine. It's been confusing enough this evening. Let's be honest. Proposer, seconder, all in favour for. He did give his reasons.
Would you like me to repeat them?
If you would.
Okay. Okay. Well, the my reason, which I gave, was the generation of additional noise and light pollution, which would create an adverse effect on the residential amenity.
That is sufficient enough. So, proposer, seconder, all in favour for.
Just have to make the point that obviously, and you know what I'm going to say, if you are refusing against officer recommendation, you need to do so for valid planning reasons, because obviously in the event of an appeal, you will be expected to provide evidence.
Are you suggesting that wasn't a valid planning reason?
I'm not suggesting, no, but I'm just saying you need to be mindful of whether...
Oh, you have to give that warning?
Yes, that's
like
what I'm not...
T's and C's at the bottom.
Well, it's what I always do. So.
Yeah, you do, yes. So we've got a proposal, we've got a seconder. All in favour for refusal? Let me do my maths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 4? Sorry, against? Against the motion. Yeah, okay. So it's been refused. Abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. The application is refused. We need a mental break for a couple of minutes to... In Hollywood, if we can have the officer's presentation, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. So it's an application for residential development of an existing industrial site. As you'll see when I show you some of the pictures, it's a site that, well, until recently, had only one employee, one business still on the site. Most of the site is currently vacant, and the proposal obviously for complete redevelopment of the site. So the proposal is for a scheme which relates to up to 30 residential units. So there's a mix of accommodation between 4 and 1 bed units on the site. It will be primarily in 3 buildings which will surround a central courtyard area, and it's also proposed that there'll be a communal cafe cum community building as part of that scheme. So this is the site. It's on Pretoria Road. As you can see from the image, so it's the site right in the middle there on the left-hand image. Primarily now a residential area. Obviously the site itself is in fact probably the last remaining element of commercial industrial activity in the area. Just to the south of the site, so just where the red arrow is an area of a former textile mill, which obviously was cleared from the site, and that replaced again by residential accommodation. So I think those kinds of factors are relevant to considering certainly the principle of redevelopment of the site itself. As an employment site, local plan policy requires a demonstration that it doesn't have an adverse impact on the employment potential of the site. The applicant has put forward a statement which will be repeated in the committee report, which sets out the reasons why a replacement residential development is deemed acceptable in this area. The obvious one is that it's now has a completely residential character. Access to the site is extremely poor for large commercial vehicles to obtain access to the site, and the buildings themselves that are on site are actually in a poor condition and require a large amount of investment. On that basis, your officers are satisfied that the principle of redevelopment for residential development would be appropriate. The issues, as I'll come to, are more in relation to issues of scale of development and its detailing and the amount of information that's been submitted in support of that. So this is just giving you the site plan itself. A couple of images. The first one is the vehicular access to the site, which actually shows the armour off Pretoria Road itself, and the image on the right is just a street frontage on there. You notice, and you'll see this on some of the other images, there are quite a lot of trees on the site, but our trees officer has looked at those and he's satisfied that given the condition of those trees, it would be acceptable for them to be removed. There's no preservation order, but obviously if that was to take place, the council's policy is for a 2-to-1 replacement of that scheme, and that's need to be taken account of in the development scheme. And this again just giving you an indication of what the site condition is, and you can see how it's quite run down. Most of the units are vacant. I think it's just the one on the right was the one that was occupied when I did my site visit. So again, they're not really units that are suitable for modern businesses to take up. And this is the kind of floor layout of the site, and I'll go through the 3 kind of main elements to it. So as you can see, it's kind of U-shape on that area. Just to get the orientation right, the left-hand side of this screen is north. So if you can just bear that in mind from the image that you saw previously. So Pretoria Road is down at the bottom of the image, and you've got a block there. It's a 4-storey block. That's the blue block. At the top end, you've got another block in kind of cream pinky colour. That again is a 4-storey block. The yellow block on the left hand side is a 2 3-storey block. Down in the bottom left corner is a pair of 2-storey houses, and the block in the middle is the cafe come community facility. But just to the right of the yellow block is the area of car parking that would be provided within the site. And one of the elements of that you'll see in the report relates to just the detailing of that area. So again, we have no objection in principle to that, but details of the relationship with the residential properties there on Collier Hill Avenue to the immediate left, we've not had that clarified. We've not had details of manoeuvring within the site adequately clarified. To the bottom right corner, there is a secondary service access to the site, and that comes off at a point where there is a mini roundabout on the road. And again, it's not been adequately demonstrated how how access through that area will work. So I would say, if you just take in mind this form of development that's coming forward. So what we've got now are the northern eastern elevations of the site. If I start actually with the eastern elevation, which is the one at the bottom, and you can see there, this is primarily a 4-storey block of flats. And one of the concerns that we've had is the relationship of that with the existing neighbouring dwellings, and particularly the external areas of those dwellings. That block will be approximately 10 metres from the boundary, and then you've just got the start of those private garden areas. The block at the image at the top is the one that relates towards Collier Hill Avenue, mainly 2-storey, a 3-storey bit but doesn't have habitable accommodation in there. That has a separation distance of over 21 metres, so we're satisfied that particular relationship is acceptable, but the issue is more to do with the scale of the bottom block. And just to illustrate that, so the first picture is taken, so well, the right-hand image, so you can see the application site right on the right-hand side of there, you can see the industrial buildings. You then see a line of trees, and beyond that there are 3 blocks of residential properties. These appear to have like communal type garden areas between them, and these are the only private space for those properties. So the new block, which will be located to the west of those, will effectively be a 4-storey block within 10 metres of that boundary. And our primary concern with the development is the scale of that block. And you have to consider that in order to make it acceptable, at the very least you'd have to remove at least 1 storey of that block, possibly even 2 stories at certain points, in order to ensure this, it resolves issues not just of overlooking but issues of overshadowing of those properties. So these are not just minor changes that would need to be done for your officers to be satisfied with that. So that's probably, in terms of the scheme, the main concern of that relationship. So again, to go back down to, again, you look at the images on the site. So now on the western and southern elevations of the site, the western elevation, so the one at the top, is the one that faces towards Pretoria Road itself. And we've had objections from residents on Pretoria Road in connection with overlooking and, again, the similar issues on that side. Your officers are less concerned about that because there is a much greater separation distance. However, there are some habitable room windows on those properties that face the site, and there would potentially therefore be a loss of privacy to those areas of the properties as well. Had this been the only issue with it though, I don't think it would be strong enough to refuse the application, but it's all part of the overall scale of development as to why this is a particular issue. And this is the pictures taken from Pretoria Road to show you that. So again, the right-hand image, Pretoria Road, the houses themselves are on the other side of the site, and you can see those walls. You can just make out some of the windows on the left-hand image that face towards the site. Just another interesting one from that point of view. That's not my picture. That's a picture taken when the mill was there at the back. So just, you know, there was a tall building in the site, and it's not therefore an issue of that. It's about the relationship with residential properties. So there's some concerns about this, but not as severe as on the other side. And these are just a couple of images showing you the other elevations. This is the southern end of the site on the right-hand image. The houses you can see there are the new ones that are pointed out. They're on the site of that previous mill. There's adequate separation distance between those. There's no issues of amenity on those. On the left-hand side, what we're looking at there is the entry to Collier Hill Avenue, and the first bit there where those shrubs and trees are, it's proposed to put 2 houses in there. The scale of those properties is deemed to be appropriate to the character of the area. There shouldn't be any issues with overlooking, anything about it being out of scale. So again, that's not an element of the scheme that we're concerned about. That's the property itself. It does have rooms in the roof space, but as you can say, as I say, it's in the roof space, so it's a 2-storey property. It doesn't directly face onto neighbouring properties at close proximity, so that element is deemed acceptable. So this is the scheme as put forward. As I say, we have no issues with the principle of the site. In terms of technical issues, conditions that would be recommended in relation to ground condition investigations, drainage schemes and so on, but they could all be dealt with through the conditions. So the concerns are related to the scale, and they're also in relation to the lack of information that we've had on a number of issues. And members know you've got a residential scheme, it's a major scheme, affordable housing issues. You look at things like viability and so on. We've not had adequate information submitted on that particular issue. It's the public open space, similar, what requirements, how they would deal with those issues. We've not had that put forward. And of course, the big one these days, biodiversity, net gain, and so on. Again, there's been a paucity of information coming forward on that. In terms of that side of things, the application has been with us since last year. The applicant did make a pre-application inquiry as well before making the application, did make some changes to that, but unfortunately, for the reasons I've outlined, they've not been deemed satisfactory to overcome all the concerns and the issues that had been raised at the time. I understand that the agent, the planning consultant that was employed at the time, is no longer employed. We received notice of that back at the end of March. I have been in contact with the owner, the applicant, since then. Unfortunately, we've not had sufficient information coming forward to deal with it. I've not been made aware, for instance, that there is another planning consultancy that could prepare revised plans and so forth. So as a result, we felt it's necessary, if you like, to draw a line on the application, bring it before members so that you can have a look at the scheme as well and make that decision. So it's recommended for refusal for the 2 reasons you'll see in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. That is a very, very comprehensive summary. Do we have any questions? Councillor?
I'm just looking at the parking. 12, sorry, what does it say now? 18 spaces. Is that adequate for the number of dwellings? And is there any legal requirement?
That's for Wendy, the parking guru.
We haven't got any local or national parking standards. So the actual numbers wouldn't worry me because we're in a sustainable location. We've got access to other amenities so people can walk or get public transport. This is a sort of thing that we see when we first get an application, and then by the time it comes to committee it looks very different, but we haven't progressed that with the applicant in this instance. So the numbers aren't worrying, but the way that you access the site and things like the service areas, so that service vehicles can turn around safely and come out safely, and where the accesses are, they're the things that are wrong with it.
Right.
Have I answered your question?
Yeah.
Any further? No? Okay, so just there's a bit of difficulty with this because we're not sure. But is there a Mr. Raymond or an objector who'd like to speak? Rahman? Mr. Rahman? No. Okay, then. I'd like to call Councillor Wade again, if you'd like to. He hasn't asked to.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a number of objections from residents about this proposal, and again, it is down to the size of the proposal, and I totally agree on the reasons for refusal, which the officer recommended. A little bit disappointed on behalf of the developer, because obviously at the end of the day we do want houses to be built. We don't want to put people off, and some of my concerns have been dealt with by the officers, and explaining that the agent has gone AWOL halfway through the process, and there has been a pre-application. So my conversation with the applicant is basically that, you know, it's not fitting off the area. It's too big a project for us to really consider, and on behalf of the residents, I would agree that, you know, this particular proposal should be rejected. And to the applicant, I would say that you know, something a bit more fitting off the area would probably be really welcome. And that's it. That's all I've got to is if there's any questions.
Do we have? Yes.
I like talking to you, Councillor. I said I like talking to you.
Oh.
Yeah, I totally agree with the points you have made. On this occasion, I will 100% back you up on this one. I think you are right. The plan that needs to, the guy needs to come back and give us a full, complete plan.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't fit to where it is supposed to be, and I agree with the reasons you've raised it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for Councillor? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
So I'll just move to the debate. I just my thoughts are simply there's not been enough information provided, councillors' recommendations, and there's been a lack of engagement on behalf of the applicant, which I would expect at this level. So has anybody got anything they wish to
move to what? Oh, sorry.
Move to what? Yeah. I just want to move it forward to refusal, if that's what.
Refusal on the grounds of what's in the report?
Yeah.
Okay. Move along the grounds of what Graham said.
Yes.
Okay, right, all right, that's fine. Do I get a seconder?
I'll second it. Thank you.
All in favour of refusal? Well, even I can add that one up. That's unanimous. Thank you. Better let Councillor Wahid go. Now he's on an hat trick.
Is he back? Or
He's good. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
No, you must stay till the end.
We move on to item 9, which is I'm sure we're all well aware of this one. This the demolition of, well, it's already been demolition, hasn't it? The former snooker club stroke nightclub on King Street, Oldham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, this obviously, again, this time it's a residential scheme that we are in support of. So, as the Chair says, I'm sure you're all aware of the site, prominent building at the junction of King Street and Union Street, which is currently now under demolition. And just to start off, we can just clarify that particular issue for members, is that although the application is termed for demolition and then for the erection of the replacement building, there's also a process. It's a prior approval process where you can come to us for simple demolition. And when somebody applies for that particular process, there's only two things we can consider. One is how you carry out the demolition, and the second one is how you leave the site after that point. So the applicant, we have engaged with the applicant, as are our highway colleagues, about how the demolition is to take place. And obviously the site has to be cleared of all the materials on there, so they can't just demolish it and then leave the site thereafter. On that basis, therefore, we've had no real say beyond that in whether the building stays or it goes. And that's important to this discussion, because you'll see in the report that a couple of heritage bodies and the Theatres Trust did raise objection to it, given the history of the site, that they should, whether the developer should look in more detail at whether the building could be reused for another purpose or it could be partly redeveloped and retained. Nevertheless, the applicant did submit a heritage statement which looked at those issues, so obviously the possibilities of whether the building could be used. Unfortunately, given the design of it, the layout of it, the condition of it, it wasn't deemed to be suitable. So it's probably likely that even if we were considering demolition, we would be recommending to you that that wouldn't have been a strong enough reason to retain the building on site. So, but nevertheless, as you know, it's a very, very prominent site, very accessible in the sense that obviously the bus stops are nearby, but also you have a tram stop within a couple of minutes walking distance of the site, as well as the accessibility, of course, to the town centre. And when we get to the next meeting, the special meeting that's been arranged, and we will be looking at other applications for residential development in the town centre, some of the issues that come forward here will be relevant to that, and probably one is, again, that Wendy will probably comment on, car parking issues and so forth on that. So these are just images of the building. These are obviously pre-demolition images. So this is just down Chaucer Street, down the side, on the opposite side from King Street. And then this is looking from King Street. On the right-hand image, the right-hand side there is the college building on there. Now the redevelopment scheme would take that open space area as well. So the building effectively will be taking that gap. And these just images just to show you, as you say, the building being demolished from the southern side backwards. So a large chunk of it has already gone. And obviously scaffolding is up there on the main road frontage for when that element of the building is also to come down. So this is the proposal, and this is ground floor plan. It'll make more sense when you show you the elevation images as well. But what you've effectively got, so King Street is at the bottom, Union Street on the left-hand side. Around those two elevations you have mainly little commercial units, little shop units, which obviously then ensures that you get active frontages into those areas of the site. Obviously we don't know what will go in precisely in those units. Then at the back of the site, so this is effectively a kind of undercroft car parking area and a servicing area, so where the access to the bin stores coming off Chaucer Street. And as you'll see, there's limited car parking on the site, so there are 15 spaces in total. The development itself is for 120 apartments. So obviously you can see, but the issue is it's a highly sustainable location, and in that context it is deemed to be acceptable. It's also, you have to look at practicality issues. So the development itself, as you'll see, is quite a tall building. We're going upwards. It's on a fairly limited footprint. So even if you took all that ground floor, you'd lose the frontages to the site of having the commercial units there, but also you wouldn't necessarily get that much more car parking on the site. So it's a practicality issue as well as one of sustainability of the site. Oops, got the wrong one there. and this is the building itself as proposed. So this would be the King Street elevation, and the way it's been designed, obviously it drops down. So the real focal point, as you'll see in my final, the photo montage image that the applicant has provided, is on the King Street, Union Street frontage, and you get the bulk of that structure there. So there's interest in the elevations as it comes down. You'll see on the right-hand side, the very right side is the college building, so the scale there then matches with the college building itself. And you'll note on the ground floor commercial units on there, that's the different frontage. The images now, so Union Street, left-hand side, the taller part of the building, and the right-hand image is just basically replicating from the opposite side, from the Chaucer Street side. So again, Union Street's on the right-hand side of that building. So it's quite an attractive building. Would be a real focal point if we could bring this forward, and obviously something that we've lost an historic building, but we might get a landmark in its place. And these are just showing you the upper floor plans. So again, you can probably work it out. The top image is the lower levels that actually go the whole way across the building. The apartment buildings are either obviously facing towards King Street or Union Street, where they're on the rear elevation facing towards Chaucer Street and therefore towards buildings, they're set back from those buildings, so there's not a real close elevation between them, so there will be adequate light received to those rooms as well. The bottom image, obviously as you get higher up, the floor plate is getting shorter, but it follows the same pattern throughout the building. And then at the top floor, that tallest element of the building, you can see those elevations there. These are the larger of the apartments that are on there. So I think I had it down 120 apartments, 57 of them would be 1 beds, 61 2 beds, and 2 3 beds. I think these are the 3 beds up at the top of the site. So give you that final image, which is the photo montage on the site. So as we say, it's a prominent site within the town centre. Obviously, we're looking to reinvigorate the town area, hopefully get people knowing the accessibility of the site, particularly with the tram stop there, who will be able to take this type of development on the site. Again, as with last one, issues, ground issues, drainage and so forth. There are no technical issues which are a problem with the development. We're not recommending, obviously, committee say total yes today because we need a legal agreement on the scheme, and that's to do with viability issues. So obviously we've gone to the applicant in terms of what would be needed for affordable housing, public open space. They produced a viability appraisal that indicated that imposition would have an adverse impact on the viability of the scheme. We've had that independently assessed, and that independent assessment concludes the same. So that's why there are no requirements up front for those contributions. However, because planning permission is granted for a 3-year period, we've got to allow for the fact that things might change in 2 years' time, for instance, when development commences. So at the point development commences, we need the viability reappraising. And if it shows at that point that those contributions can be made, then the policy compliance will come into force again. But clearly this is a very, not a cheap development. You can tell that it would, in order to bring this forward on this site, we've got to be cognizant of that. But we've got an adequate compromise here. We're saying, we can't do those contributions now, but if that does become, we have got that controlled. So that's why we're recommending approval subject to the conditions and to that legal agreement. And in fact, the working up on that has already commenced. The applicant has already put that effort forward to us to get those things going. Oh, that's the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a question for myself to members. There is no big Beatles fans here, is there? Okay. Councillor Hartness.
Yeah, I just wanted to come on the viability bit. So we've got 120 apartments here, and not one is going to be for affordable housing, affordable accommodation, and the government's new policy are looking to try and increase the number of affordable rent, which I think is a good thing. In Oldham, that's a big thing, and there's a huge lack of private rented accommodation for people to access. And I think it's just really unfortunate that not one of those 120 can be attributed to that. And I just wonder if we can do anything to insist that at least some of that is used for that, because it's a big issue. And I think, you know, in a sustainable location like that, where you can get quite a decent amount of money for some of those others, that we can't have some of that in there.
Can we respond, Graham?
I think Peter might want to add on this, but as I said, that's the purpose of us having the appraisal carried out and us having that assessed, so that we're not simply taking their word for it. Yes, that would be ideal in those circumstances, but if the consequence of that is that the development becomes unviable, then we don't get the affordable units one way or the other. So I don't know, Peter, you want to add more on that?
Yeah, the short answer is no, there's not a lot we can do, because the national policy allows that caveat for viability. And so, yeah, it irks me a little bit too, but I understand it from a financial point of view, that, you know, something like this, it's different for Oldham, isn't it? Let's be frank. It's something different and new, and it's a challenge there from a market point of view. And the viability appraisal's been done. It's very clear that right now it can't afford those contributions or to allow some of the units to be affordable. We've put the Section 106 in to capture it if we can, in as Graham says, in 2 years' time when they come forward to start delivery. If the market has changed and it can afford it, we'll get some. But right now, that's the position. I think the other thing to add on that kind of point is again, I agree with the Councillor Hartness, it irks me as well, but there is an element of, you've also got to look at this in the light of, what would that site be otherwise? You know, prior to the demolition, it would have continued to be an empty building that was not usable, and there was becoming an eyesore as a result. Now it's been demolished. Even if we did, I'll say no, because there's no affordable housing to this, the site would now just sit empty. So I think in that context, you know, we're getting what we can, and we're getting hopefully a good development that is bringing something different to the town, even if it's not affordable housing.
Councillor?
Yeah, it's a question to Wendy around parking. You knew it was coming up. You know, I have an issue with the shortage of parking in the town centre, especially accessible. Looking at the development and the number, I'd expect there'd be more than 2 persons in there with disabilities or the need for accessible parking. How do you think that development will affect the rest of the parking issues in the town centre?
If I change mics, I can look at you. It will only affect the rest of parking in the town centre if everybody in those apartment blocks has a car and then goes to look at a public parking space for residential parking, which will cost a fortune. So again, I'll explain the way I have to assess it. So we've got the local and national car parking standards, and there aren't any at the moment. And if we do bring in local parking standards, there'll be maximum. So even if there was no parking here, I wouldn't be able to say, well, you need 2 spaces per apartment. And I'd never say that in this type of location anyway, because I don't think you'd get a more sustainable location in Oldham than that, because you've got access, obviously, to the tram stop, buses, all the amenities that you could want in that location. So I don't think it will have an effect on car parking in the town centre in general. And the other thing in this particular area, so say we had a block of terraced houses with no parking on Durka. If you've got a car you'll go and find another place to park on the street. Here you can't. So anybody moving into these already knows that, and if they do have a car, they'll have to go and find somewhere safe, probably quite expensive, over a long term, to park a car. So they'd probably choose not to.
Thank you, Wendy. I think isn't it? I think if if you looked at it and you had a car, it wouldn't be suitable, would it? To the disability
aspect
yeah,
of it,
that.
because if there's a lift in there, that would be an option for somebody with a disability.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then they might not be able to use the tram
Mm-hmm.
because there is no feasibility when you've got a disability.
Has Wendy answered to you? Okay, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Did you get the finer detail of like the room sizes and all that lot, and everything was up to standard? You know, the right size as a room and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've got the details that they meet national space standards, and obviously they have to do that now because PFE is a requirement for that.
Thank you, Graham. Any further questions? No, thank you. Could I call Mr. Sadiq to come forward, please? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah. Are you a Beatles fan?
Maybe when I was younger.
It's never actually been proved he played there, but I just thought I'd mention it.
We are, in a sense, that we're actually restoring the Cavern Club back. So
really,
we have an affinity to those other practice, and so don't worry.
Well, that's top trump me. I'll be honest with you. Thank you so much for that. So, Mr. Sadiq, 3 minutes when you're ready.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd just like to kind of start with the fact that I'm a former student of the Oldham Sixth Form. I spent probably every day of my life in the Riley Snooker Club when I was studying there. So, it's actually a great honour to study somewhere, be somewhere, and then asked to redevelop it. You spend 7 to 10 years studying, and to redevelop it is a great honour. So the proposal is for 120 units. What we need to understand is that Oldham is now reaping the benefits of Manchester's redevelopment, and that should follow with good architecture, good sustainable architecture that does represent what is going to come forward for Oldham, hopefully in the future. And what we've tried to do here is a kind of mature architecture that sits in adjacent to the Science College, which is a really good building. What we have tried to do is also, as you alluded to, not squeeze tiny, small apartments into an apartment block that's not sustainable for families to grow or people to have partners, grow with their partners, stay for a long amount of time. So we're actually not just meeting national space standards, we're actually increasing it. So the average one bed is about 50 square metres, the two beds are 67, which is about 3 or 4 square metres above the national space standards there on each apartment. And as you can see from the kind of CGI, there's a clear legibility of the architecture where you have a clear bottom, a middle and a top, and those then tear down back to the adjacent science building. The idea of the existing building being kept, it's a kind of double-edged sword. Architecturally, what we're saying is that that building was on such a prominent corner of Oldham, but it actually turns it back to the junction. It turns its back inwards because obviously it started with a theatre and a snooker hall, but really on a prominent junction you want a building that opens itself up to the public, activates itself on a corner and looks out as a welcoming kind of junction. So this building actually offers a kind of solution. Yes, offers a kind of solution to the growth of Oldham and just a passage of time that naturally takes place. And just a final note on the height and the kind of idea of this place is that that junction is so prominent. As you arrive on the bus 409, which you kind of spent all my life on, and the tram, you want to be able to see where you're arriving to in the distance. So a tall building, you kind of gets bigger as you get close to it, and that point in time is where it is. So just to conclude then, yeah, I hope, you know, the panel also see the kind of the vision that Oldham has, the vision that we have, and, you know, and the case officers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. There has been interest in this site before in terms of development, and things didn't happen. I mean, I know the site's being levelled as we sort of speak. This is viable and deliverable, and it will happen.
So one of the reasons we were kind of brought on board was because previous schemes were, I think sometimes when people get hold of a site, they are not as experienced in the buildability. So there's obviously a balance between beautiful architecture and on a picture and beautiful architecture in real life, and everything has to correlate with each other. So what we've done is, when I say mature, I mean that it can be built as you see it, in a sense. Wonderful.
Do we have any questions?
It's not actually a question, just an observation in terms, I would like to commend you on the actual design of the building and the way you've actually considered what was already there in terms of the prominence of it. And personally, I think it's well designed, and hopefully it should be deliverable.
Thank you.
Any further? No, thank you, and that's a really positive project in my view, and also the connection you have with the town is obviously not gone. You know, it's proud to have someone come back and make such a positive contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, does anybody want to comment, or, I mean, other than that, I mean, I personally think it's a fantastic scheme. I think there are issues with parking, but obviously you wouldn't, you know, it's being marketed towards a certain demographic, should we say. There's plenty of transport links which countermand that. I think the thing with disabled things been covered. So, anyone got anything further?
Just, I mean, as Peter knows, I'm a stickler for so affordable homes and Section 106, but obviously we can understand why that is not the case. I think this is one of the best applications that we've had for a while in terms of where it is and the way it's actually being designed as well, and how prominent it will be on that particular site, and I wish the developer good luck in terms of ensuring that it gets delivered, and I would like to move approval.
Do I get a seconder?
I'll second that.
All in favour? Sorry, Paul. Sorry, John. There we go. That's passed unanimously. I don't think we're going to go on record with our memories and things and stuff. Yeah, but we'll stick to the Beatles. Romeo and Juliet. Yeah. Do you like the Beatles? Well, that's excellent. Thank you, everyone. So, we move on to item 10, which is the erection of 2 industrial buildings in Drury Lane.
Thank you, Chair. Just do a brief introduction on this one. So, as you said, it's item agenda 10. It's erection of 2 industrial buildings for uses in use classes B2 and B8. It's land known as Profiles Point on Drury Lane in Chadderton. It's got some visuals here to outline the location of the site. So, you can see in the red line boundary, it's a 2.6 hectare site on the northern side of Drury Lane in Chadderton. It is located in a designated business employment area where such uses are directed to, essentially. There are some dense tree cover to the northern and western boundaries, and the site sits within a wider area with a range of industrial type buildings for storage and commercial uses, as you can see from the aerial shot there. So the 2 buildings that are proposed are to the front of the site. They're not in close proximity to any residential properties, and they take access from the existing access provision, which is from Drury Lane. So there's a site plan there that shows the location of the 2 buildings either side of the access there at the front of the site. The building on the left of that image, Unit A, as it's known on the plans, is just over 830 square metres, and the one on the other side is Unit B, 593 square metres. Design, which I'll show on the elevations, just represents the character that's typically found, more functional type development, but also in terms of its aesthetics, integrates with the established character of the surrounding area. So as you can see in the report, all relevant consultees have been consulted. None have raised any objections, but that is obviously subject to the imposition of various conditions that are on the recommendation. There are no third-party objections in relation to the publicity given to the application. So the main issues, as set out in the report, essentially whether the principle is acceptable, which we believe it is. Design and residential amenity we're happy with. Highway safety, drainage, land conditions are all covered in the report, but also any additional details required through the conditions. And for the biodiversity net gain, it's actually exempt because it's on an area of hard standing. So as you can see in the report, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you for that insight. Do we have any questions for the officer?
Happy to approve.
So we're going to go straight to the vote? Yep. Do we get a seconder?
Second.
All in favour? Approved. Thank you. Last item is, can we have an appeals update, please?
Certainly. So it's as normal, the item's just for noting rather than a decision. So it lists the new appeals, and I think we've had one appeal decision that was allowed, which was a householder application, and had an enforcement notice supported by the inspectorate as well. Just want to take the opportunity, though, to just highlight we had an appeal decision yesterday that's not made it onto the agenda, which we'll obviously report next time. But I thought it was prudent to raise this now. This was a development for at Stockport Road in Lidgate that was brought to committee last year. It was for the erection of one detached dwelling and the installation of a dropped curb. So the application was brought with a recommendation for approval, and on the committee the decision was made to refuse the application against officer recommendation. So the appeal decision, the appeal has been allowed, so planning permission has been granted. But one of the important things is there was an application made for costs by the appellant on the grounds that the council had acted unreasonably in making that decision. The appeals, the award for cost has been refused, so essentially that's good news. I just thought it was important just to highlight some of the justification for that, which just emphasises the importance of how we make our decisions. Said in this case, I've noted the recommendation of the council officers and I agree with their findings. However, the decision is one which is a matter of judgment. Members in this case were entitled not to accept the professional advice of officers so long as a case could be made for the contrary view. And although brief, this is talking about the reason for refusal on the decision notice, the reason for refusal provides an understanding of the context and reasons why members took an alternative view to council officers. So therefore there was no unreasonable behaviour demonstrated. So that was a positive.
Well, that's testament. Sometimes we're right then, aren't we?
Right and wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Bring the meeting to a close. Thank you for attendance.
Thanks.
I get back and I'm like, oh, it has to be. And then if you do it, I can't settle. You're like, oh, that's it, you're uncomfortable when I do that, and then I'm up late. But then you wake up the following morning like, yeah.